Good morning. Today we have Guru Kali. Guru is an old friend of mine. We go back probably about 25 years. He's going to be talking today around aligning people, planet, and profit. He's from the Conscious Leadership Academy. A bit about him. He's the director of the Academy and the creative director of Agni Media Concept. The Conscious Leadership Academy is a not-for-profit company that offers programs for change to advance game-changing solutions to build conscious leadership capacity in South Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and ultimately into countries that see the impact of conscious leadership in the socio-economic space. The establishment of the Conscious Leadership Academy is a call to action to deliver and understanding of the practical dynamics of consciousness and its impact on leadership, business, government, and society. So today is very, very interesting. It's taking a different look, a different perspective at how COBRA partners can assist, not only when it comes to rescuing businesses, but also when it comes to leadership. And a bit about COBRA. COBRA is a pro bono initiative. It's designed to assist businesses in distress, to assist teams, leaders of these businesses, and we help in any which way that we can. We set up private Zoom sessions with you and your team, or with you and your employees if need be. We mediate debtor-creditor relationships. We try and keep you out of rescue, but if you need to go into rescue because you need the moratorium, we do that on a pro bono basis. So bear that in mind. Part and parcel of the initiative is to provide you with information such as our knowledge base on our website, www.cobra.org.za, or through these insightful webinars that we have every day. So before I hand over to Guru, let me introduce the remaining panelists. We have Emma Marseille from IQ Business. IQ Business is a co-founder of COBRA, together with Engaged Business Turnaround. We have Renee Klopper from IQ Business, Adam Kraker, he's the chief executive of IQ Business, and Paul Michael Keichel, who is a partner at Schindler's Attorneys. So Guru, over to you. Thanks so much for being here today. We're really, really grateful. Let's see what you have to say around leadership and consciousness. Thanks, over to you. You're on mute.
Morning.
There we go.
How's it, Maurice?
We can see your screen perfectly.
Fantastic. Cool. Thanks, everyone. As mentioned, I facilitate training for the Conscious Leadership Academy. So we primarily work with business people and executives, engaging them with various processes and techniques to transform or shift their lens of perception. And that's very much what I'm going to be talking about today, is how we as human beings process the world that we experience. Pretty much everyone joining us is a human being, whether you attach the label of CEO or business person or employee, wife, mother, child, whatever it is, human beings. And the influence that that lens of perception that we have as human beings has in our lives and subsequently on the expression of it in our actions. I thought today we'd touch on a bit of the neuroscience of it, just an academic understanding. It seems to be relatively easier for business people to digest, and research from neurobiology and psychiatry and psychology that has been made over the past 20 to 30 years, understanding the human system with advances of technology and medicine and looking at the future, hopefully, and the way that we work with consciousness. Maybe we can touch on that towards the end, and then maybe some Q&A. That would be good. Great, so let's get started. What is consciousness? Consciousness is a very overused word. Each ology, each science has their own perspective of what is consciousness. Physics, neurobiologists, and obviously so in favor of their own position. The most often used term that we use, or the most common term that we use to refer to consciousness, is awareness, and specifically awareness of the self and of the environment. So the assumption that we generally make is that what we see and touch and taste and smell, that this is reality. The information that we absorb through our senses is actually reality. Welcome to the real world. But it is not. The human physical senses operate within a specific range of frequency. In the slide that I have up, it shows sight, and specifically in electromagnetic radiation from gamma to radio waves, the small sliver of spectrum that we actually experience through what we call sight. This is with all senses. It's called an absolute threshold of sensations, the minimum sensation required to register a particular stimulus. Then if we look at the way that these senses are processed within the system, it operates differently to other creatures, to other animals. There's the ability for certain animals to, in inverted commas, swap the neurotransmitters of our senses. So as a bat is able to hear sight, there are various animals that can do this. Manta rays can see UV light, so it's well out of our spectrum, even dogs with their senses. So our senses are very limited, and it is not the reality that exists, but rather a reality that we are able to absorb through the limits of our biology. We don't even have isolated odor receptors. They're just a combination of other neurotransmitters and other sense receptors in our brain happening simultaneously, and it becomes a combination of things, which is one of the reasons why sense is the strongest link to emotion. So what we're aware of is only a small portion of reality, and this is evident in various things. My favorite one is object permanence, which is the game that you play with children, peekaboo. Is even time permanence, that an object remains in front of me, is not necessarily a fact. It does not necessarily become the experience of the individual. And as a baby would see it, once you cover your face, you seemingly disappear from existence. And then when you pop back in, it's humorous. The person just popped into existence. So it's things like this that we call object permanence, and the understanding of the brain and the way that it works. And of course, selective attention and how we're able to manipulate selective attention. So selective attention would be within our environment, we're able to hone in and focus on something specific. And again, the assumption is, well, I need to focus on work, so I'm able to, but the system is automated. So even as a mother can be in a noisy street, but will hear the sound of the child, it's the programming and the memory exists within the body. How does it work? As a physical process, the psychobiodynamic process, before we even interpret the world around us, before you coordinate the sounds that I'm making right now out of my mouth, and you actually recall the meaning of it that you learned in high school and string together a sentence with meaning, before all of that happens, the senses are absorbed. The process of that happening occurs in the limbic system. So the limbic system in the brain, coming after the Latin word limbus, meaning border. And that is pretty much what the limbic system is. It is the border between the reality and the world that each of us lives in, because there is a difference. You could say it's the border between the sensory neurons as we absorb the world through the sensory neurons, and it is processed into motor neurons, into action. Occurs through the limbic system, including response, automotive nervous systems, respiratory, digestive systems, your glandular system, the entire somatic systems of your muscle, your fascia, your muscles, your joints, all of those kind of things. And the neurons moving through the brain system area into various areas of the nervous system. Where are we here? So this relay of sensory information between the brain regions and the peripheral nervous system, it can happen automatically with our heartbeat, temperature, subconscious breathing functions of the body. The limbic system then affects the memory, reasoning, judgment, the four actioning, the four lobes of the brain, planning complex cognitive processes, behavior, personality expressions, decision-making. It moderates social cues, social behavior. Ultimately, it is the rules for who we are, who we say we can be and cannot be. And it is played out in this intellect and the memory and the processing of the system. And through this process, it activates various aspects: episodic memory in the hippocampus, mental emotional response patterns, the filing cabinet in the amygdala. Then there are reinforcement and pleasure reward centers, the programming of our reinforcement and pleasure reward systems in the something nuclei. And then obviously it regulates our hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus controls our homeostasis, our staying the same. And it also controls our hormones. And hormones are our emotions. Emotions are experienced as sensations in the body, as glands activate the production of dopamine and cortisol and epinephrine and oxy. And that specific sensation that we label as love, fear, anger, whatever it is that we experience physically, as butterflies in the stomach or cold sweats and shivers of fear, is associated with a concept, with an ideology that has been associated by that process of the limbic system. Constructive and destructive concepts that we hold, that we attach to ourselves, and it has an automatic response. So when we look at perception, the reality that we experience is not reality as it is, but rather it is reality as well as our perception of that reality, the world that we see. It's not even the entire reality. There are aspects of form perception, moving back to just purely the sensation and the processing of senses in the body. There's something that we call form perception, where we do not absorb the entire environment. We absorb aspects of the environment and then fill in the blanks. We can also recall memories where we'd have alternate memories to friends or partners, simply because our recollection is not reality. It was just our experience of it. There's also something called the person swap experiment. You can check it out on YouTube. It's quite a cool social experiment that was done. So it's out of our perception that it is out of our perception that we order the environment, but it unavoidably weaves in bias. So we absorb the world and our perception triggers responses. And this is where we become oh so human, because we become stuck in our response patterns, attached to our biases, whether we're aware of it or not, and most likely not. And this being attached to a single view that is actually malleable and can be manipulated. For an example of this is, if I ask you a question, what kind of bird do you see? So most people would first respond a duck. But if I change the question, if I'd ask what kind of mammal do you see, you possibly would have seen the rabbit first. So this is a leading way of manipulating the stimulus, the object stimulus, and the perception that the person has of it. And the response is automatic. As the words came out of my mouth, for most of you, you probably first would have noticed the duck before the rabbit, before you stepped back, before you changed your view, you changed your perspective, your perception, or you shifted the focus of your lens from the duck to the rabbit. And the response is involuntary. The body keeps score. It would be the same as saying, do not, absolutely do not think of a pink elephant jumping up and down next to you. Automatic. So this is the way we see the world, and it influences how we see the world. Whether you notice the eye floaters in the previous slide, the shade of hue, it's It's the way that it works. And these filters or frameworks these filters and frameworks, they get activated through stimuli, external stimuli. Where are we? Archetypes. Okay. So these lenses of perception that we have, most often they're created, they're formed through trauma and subtle traumas, predominantly in the formative years of a child, but then again reinforced, as well as new traumas, the ability for new traumas or new agreements within the system, whether traumatic or not, to be written on the inside of the skin. And also through epigenetics, interesting studies being done now in terms of the way that we process what we call hereditary diseases, and hypotheses such as a little girl walking out of her room at the age of 6, dark at night, a cat jumps out at her, and automatically a fear in that moment, an experience of fear gets lodged and associated and written in the system. Child grows up with an aversion towards cats, gets married, has children. Her children grow up without any exposure to cats, and also a subtle aversion towards cats in their constant and consistent environment. That child will then grow up and potentially, possibly developing allergies for cats. So these are the studies of epigenetics that is happening at the moment, and the way that we actually absorb these associations and agreements that we make with ourselves. And they often seem like train tracks. Once they're laid down, it is very difficult to see an alternate way of viewing things. It's that saying, you cannot see the picture when you're standing in the frame. Yet different people have different lenses of perception. Two people can look at the same situation and see something completely different. So as we attempt to intellectualize this process, we have developed tools as humans, developed tools and techniques and assessments, structures to attempt to understand the various iterations of the human being. From a psychology side, they're quite a fan of the MCMI and the PDI, which is a personality archetype, and used very much for diagnosing all types of personality pathologies, whether narcissism to physical things such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoid, antisocial disorder, all the disorders you can think of. That's the world that it lives in. The business world would be most familiar with archetypes such as Myers-Briggs, maybe SCORE, Enneagram, Spark. There's lots of different structures, and everything pretty much puts human beings into a subset of specific behaviors that we generally tend to respond, how we generally tend to respond. The most common structure for this automated response system is called the window of tolerance, which everything would fall into, and it unpacks our sympathetic response, that flight or flight response, or the sympathetic response of paralysis, where you just freeze and you don't run, you don't fight, you're just stuck. So that the sympathetic response of flight or flight and paralysis, and then the parasympathetic response, which is more associated with having a calm, centered state of mind, being able to decipher what you need to, activating the intellect ultimately. And this is how we define the world. All of our experiences from being a child, my perspective that I often think of is that human beings are born premature. We are born and unable to walk for a year, 2 years, whereas we look at other creatures, it's within a few days. Some instantaneously are able to get up on their feet. By the time we're able to eat or communicate, yet the body is recording from moment one, from in utero. And the primary function at the body would be to survive. How do we survive? Survive the species. That's programming at what we'd call our nature level. In that process of programming, we begin to create associations between our interaction with reality and our need to survive. And it happens at various levels in the way we define our world, whether it is love, success, gender, ethnicity, sex, nationality. Ultimately, it endears a tribalism of what we believe, and obviously a more comfort with those that believe similar traits to us. And it creates an us and them mentality ultimately. Most of us are unaware of it. If you've ever used the phrase, you know what they're like, automatically, the moment you have placed yourself in a position of they, us and them, you have created, not even created, you have accessed a bias that already exists within the system. So that's how the human being processes, that's how the human system processes information, severely flawed, with biases and ideology and pathologies. The application of this, that's obviously from a research side, from where we are as human beings and academia catching up with what's known about consciousness and practice already. And then there's the application of it. This lens of perception that we have, the way that we see the world, our reality, stuck in our way and unable to experience an alternate state of viewing the world, a different way of viewing the world. Often the first experience of this, a person will become aware that first that the lens is actually malleable. You can shift focus. Before, like when you go to the, is it the optometrist, when they put various glasses in front of you and they test your eyesight, A or B, and there's several lenses. And one would be able to remove lenses that are inefficient, maybe polish up lenses that you've accumulated along the way, or if you're very lucky, have, even if it's for a momentary experience, to remove all the lenses just for a split second. And that is very much the type of work that we do, where we attempt to move leaders towards having that experience. And there's a specific reason because of that. Understanding that this lens is malleable also allows external forces to influence. And I first caught on to this when I started my own research into the neuroscience of consciousness, was through a guy by the name of Martin Lindstrom. He wrote a book called Biology, B-U-Y-ology. And he's a neuroscientist, and obviously in the media and marketing, I took a liking to him and certain research that he had conducted. And various case studies that he goes through, including using fMRI technology to look at the responses of people, of consumers, when exposed to a specific product or brand. They looked at the Mini Cooper and found that the parts of the brain that activate, that highlight when a person is exposed to the Mini Cooper, is the same parts of the brain that get activated and highlighted when we look at a cute baby. This obviously was done post-product development many, many years ago, over almost 2 decades ago, probably, when this experiment was done, when the fMRIs were done. We're at a point now where this research preempts product development. We'd also, there's another video, another social experiment that is fantastic by a place called Biteback. And they're very much involved with health education in the UK, and they have a test called triple dipped chicken. I'll actually find the link and put it on that chat, which again exposes how one through marketing is able to influence a person's lens of perception Does that mean you are influencing the person itself? You're influencing behavior from my perspective. And this is the research that we've done so far. Is the system, the human system, is it okay? Is it not okay? Is it just? Is it moral? Can it be fixed? Does it need to be fixed? That is a different question. The need to engage with consciousness is where we step in. And specifically in looking to the future. There's a concept called reality distortion field, which was first used to describe Steve Jobs by one of his employees, but someone. And it referred to the ability to engage people at an experiential level that they would adopt your vision. And that was what that dude was talking about when he described Steve Jobs, was that Steve Jobs had access to this reality distortion field. He could step into your space and have the ability for you to shift your position, your mind, alter your reality, and change your lens of perception to suit his. So now we look at the future. And pretty much where we are with climate change, space travel, AI, and obviously the ideology that is still currently holding us as human beings. When it comes to aspects of AI and technology, Neuralink, which is currently doing testing on implantable brain devices that would be able to access the entire neural network and alter everything from quelling Alzheimer symptoms to reprogramming your lens of perception. So if you see a human like a Jeff Bezos and you really feel that you want to embody and imbibe these qualities that Jeff Bezos had, you can wake up at 3 in the morning and work for 20 hours a day and your entire focus is just on the grindstone and committed completely to that one single cause. You could simply go onto your laptop, reprogram it, and for away. You're good to go. Technology, obviously, how it has enabled not only our ability to communicate, but when we look at the neurobiology of it and advances that have been made specifically due to the science's affinity towards pharmacology and pharmacological intervention. And the results that have come out of that, where you find psychoactive substances being commonly used, DMT vape pens on the beaches of Cape Town, and obviously climate change and ideology, which for me is very much linked as well. During this time, current most unprecedented circumstances in the history of our society, I think we've seen in the news and the way that various nations have dealt with what we're doing, what we're currently dealing with as a planet, and how ideology, the belief of a human being, is able to influence not only the other human beings, but subsequently shift our actions and our behavior towards something that is more destructive. We didn't need COVID to figure this out. We've had research on climate change for decades. If there's anyone who, how many more cords do we need? How much more research is required? Yet ideology marred by personal greed seems to be a barrier. So exposure to research doesn't work. Knowing that we view the world from a subjective bias doesn't shift the bias. Signing agreements and doing checkboxes, and even to a certain degree metrics, and metrics are very important, especially in the business world as well. I know metrics are are exceptionally important, and a lot of various tools around for that as well. I know Adam is a fan of B Corp for his metrics. Pepe's got some cool tricks in his book. Brenda's got a new book coming out, and Michael Juden's also got some nice hints and tips in there on how to quantify behavior ultimately within an organization. But the metrics and the research and the agreements have not assisted. And if we look at it, may sound like crazy talk. Punch it in, and if you want to imbibe the qualities of Martha Stewart and go make the best brownies in the world, it is possible, and it sounds like crazy talk, but it is not. And especially if we look at growth. Growth is exponential. We look at the growth of technology over time. There's an aspect we call the knowledge doubling curve. As we excel in a specific field over time, 10,000 hours to be a master, whatever it is. But as we increase those increments, at some point, the knowledge and the access to that starts to grow exponentially. Our GDP, teen suicide rate, population growth itself is exponential. Speak to Pepe, he'll tell you. And when we look at the growth and the way that our technology, whether it is in AI, in neurobiology and pharmacology, whether it is in climate change and the effects of that, is that we can expect exponential growth. How do we deal with that? Now we come back to the question that I tend to veer away from, which is it moral? Is it just? Is the way that we as human beings operate in the world, does it serve the planet? Right or wrong, I am not sure. What I can say is the current consequences, where we currently are. And even though we have made tremendous strides in technology, in the way we communicate, in our EQ, in filtering what are termed soft skills or those feminine qualities of trust and care into our corporate world and into our political sphere, ultimately the business and politics that deal on that ground level, that livelihood Maslow-based level with human beings. It's still a fuck up. Pardon the French, it is what it is. We still have riots of inequality, whether it's current femicide in Turkey or umbrella riots in fighting for freedom of the simplest thing in Hong Kong, the Liger people and their persecution in internment camps, as a colony of China, the colonies of America and Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, and the atrocities that are being perpetrated there. There's no good guy and bad guy when I look at the way that nations currently produce themselves on the planet. Is there a solution? Consciousness. So when we say consciousness, it is who we are as human beings. It is not what we have become. The lens of perception, the associated response patterns, mental and emotional response patterns that we have taken on ourselves and that we are now attached to, that is not us. How do we expose a human being to an experience, a physical experience, an experience, you can't say physical if it's not even, if it doesn't even exist. The experience of the physical was first considered as the homunculus, which is just the sensation that we have as a body of its own, whether it's a phantom pain when you amputate an arm or a psychosomatic illness. It is not necessarily happening in the body, but the sensation is merely an experience of the mind. And if we can shift a person's experience from what they have been used to and programmed with from birth, even if it is for a moment, to an altered state of reality where they're able to see the world from a different place, then what we have found is that there is generally an overcoming sensation of oneness. Now, that is a word that definitely does not get tickets to most corporate events. Oneness, love, these kind of words that businesses and politics tend to stay away from. This experience has been cited before. It is known as the overview effect, and most commonly cited by astronauts, not most commonly cited by astronauts who have observed that an overwhelming sensation when they viewed Earth from out of space, simply by shifting their perspective from standing on the ground, looking at a close distance, and shifting it to a distance, they're able, just by shifting that space, you are able to see the planet without borders, without the lines drawn in the sand, without the walls, and without the electric fences, and without the distance, without the us and them. They see the world as one, and subsequently an overwhelming sensation of oneness and love with the world. They return, and then most of these people seem to devote their life to bettering humanity. When I look at the world, I kind of think, what is it in need of? Rather than, is it good or is it bad? The good or bad, whatever you say is good or bad, comes with your bias. Is it in need of? And currently, when I look at the experience of us, is that we've always been doomed to extinction, whether it was 40 million years or something, that the sun is going to crash into the earth. Human beings on the planet have always been doomed for extinction by natural causes. To create our own destruction, it seems that what would be required is to remove the us and them. And here we move away from being conscious as a verb, the word conscious, to stepping into the domain of consciousness. Processes, tools, techniques that we use where one is able to step out of their current frame of reference to a place of neutrality. And then for the first time, choice becomes available. Before then, there is no choice. It is simply just what you have been told and what you know, and just regurgitating programming. And all sorts of tools and techniques to dip in at various levels, right down to the simplest technique, the most simplest and most accessible technique of the breath. Even while you're sitting behind your laptop, just to become aware of the breath. While you've been sitting here for the past 40 minutes, yes, I can talk. While you were sitting here for the past 40 minutes, you were not aware of your breath. Yet, we're able to shift the focus to the breath. If we're able to shift our focus further and further inwards, there is potential that one would be able to experience what they call the overview effect. There are other ways and methods to do that as well. But in looking at the world, I'm not sure if there is another solution. Metrics is not going to sort it out, neither are policies. And I simply say that because we can learn from history that man does not learn anything from history. We have been making agreements for centuries, yet due to ideology and belief, we have still been severing heads for centuries. There's still people who are being oppressed, still atrocities being perpetrated on human beings. So we look now from the Conscious Leadership Academy side, obviously, to business world, and that's who we deal with. We deal with business people who see this, who have experienced this for themselves, and understand that there is one truth that they know. Everything else about God, about religion, about men, women, your race, your nationality, your age, cannot be verified. What we can verify is that you're going to die, whether from corona now or later on. And pardon me if this is a bit too blunt for the audience. And the leaders that we deal with, I mention this because the leaders that we deal with are often towards their retirement. They've achieved what they needed to. They're CEOs, they're chairmen of huge listed companies, and they, from a material world, they've accomplished everything. And now the awareness has struck them. Their lens of perception has shifted focus to the fact that their end will soon be coming. And as most leaders think of, they think of legacy, and we think of vision. And when you look at the vision of a business aligned to the leader and the manifestation of it, and how it is produced within the company, it is a reflection of the consciousness of that leader. The leaders, if they operate from a place of consciousness, we find that the businesses exist in a cohabitable environment. They see themselves as part of the ecosystem, as opposed to the traditional methodology of the human being, which is an extractionist approach. It is to take, to come into a land, to take, to move into a market on an environment. How much can we take? How much market share can we take? How much profit can we make? How much more money can we have? The accumulation becomes one way. And unfortunately, not feeding back into the environment that we exist has led us down a path where it's seemingly there's our survival as a species has been threatened. So this is the need for conscious leadership and engaging with this type of work. And yeah, I hope that my waffling on has just given you a new or a additional way to understand the processing of the human being. Yeah, Maurice, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
I hope I didn't waffle too much. I hope it made sense. If there's anything that I skipped, please let me know.
No, that's brilliant. Have you heard of Gillian Gork by any chance, the mentalist? He was actually on our show 2 days ago.
I didn't watch the webinar, but I have heard of him, yes.
Because he advocates something very, very similar. And basically what he says is you got to look at macro causes and micro causes. And you got to accept that where we are, our experience is really predetermined by macro causes. We won't go into micro causes, but by macro causes. And that's why you got to detach yourself in a sense and become part of the experience. And that detachment, it was quite interesting. You didn't use the word mindfulness or meditation, but you can experience that. Now, what's interesting is you went on about perception. And one of the biggest misperceptions out there, in my mind, is the notion of free will. I'm going to show you a small video in relation to the Limbic experiment, okay, where they objectively sought to demonstrate that us believing that our choices are our own are in fact an illusion and not, in fact, we don't in fact have free will. We actually just perceive and we're not sure who is in fact perceiving. So I'm going to share the screen and show the audience the Limbic experiment because it's I find it fascinating, I really do. And then I'll ask you to comment, Guru.
Put your hand in front of you and flex your wrist. You presumably first had a thought. Flex my wrist. That then caused your wrist to move. That's how it seems. But Benjamin Libet's experiments in the 1980s have cast some doubt on that. In his neuroscience lab, he wired up subjects to an EEG machine measuring brain activity via electrodes on their scalps, and then asked them to choose to perform a simple hand movement when they felt like it. He also got them to record the time at which they made a conscious decision to move their hands. Disconcertingly, he found evidence of brain activity initiating the movement hundreds of milliseconds before the conscious decision was reported. In other words, his experiments seemed to show that the conscious decision didn't cause the movement. The brain activity bringing about movement started before the individual willed anything to happen. Some people think this is proof that free will is an illusion, that our conscious decisions are more like reports on what is already happening than the causes of our action. Libet didn't go that far. He thought that we might not have free will, but there's still time for what some have called free won't, a conscious veto of an action that is started in the brain. Others are more skeptical about the implications of these experiments. They point out difficulties of recording the time of a subjective decision to move, and question whether Libet's findings could apply to more complex conscious decisions based on reasons.
Let me just stop the share. What's interesting about that is it's not only, that's the confirmation, the scientific confirmation around the question of free will, but there's also the logic. If every cause has a preceding effect, or as you dealt with desires, biases, those biases, where do those biases come from? It's not as though we choose them, yet we perceive the world through a lens of biases. So I thought I'd ask you to comment on all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the microculture of our immediate environment. It's that culture getting absorbed into the influence of our parents, our siblings, our friends, our school, our religion, our organizations, and then obviously the macro culture of our greater society. And consistently exposing ourselves to the repetition of a stimulus will ingrain itself in the body. If you listen to any physical therapist or personal trainer, they will tell you straight up, it's not what you do once a week that counts, it's what you do every day, or what you do 5 out of the 6 days that counts. So that repetition of constantly, and as a practical suggestion for nowadays, during COVID-19, the exposure from the media, and I'm going to put this on this video, and you guys can check it out when you've got a chance. But this is a video to that bite back triple dip chicken, and it's basically the same thing that you put in your video, Maurice. It's a social experiment that proves that even what you order is not your choice. So when do you access choice? And for me, and in our experience in the work that we do, accessing choice comes for the first time when you are able to remove yourself from the associations of the micro and the macro culture. That is the first time you're able to see that these choices are my choices. But in order to do that, you then have to ask yourself, who are you? And that seems to be the rabbit hole that we find ourselves in as human beings often. I'm not sure if
there's a question, but before I jump into the question, I just want to comment on it, and that's the question is, what can we do, in relation to the COVID chaos and the negative thoughts arising from COVID? And I just want to make an observation, and that is that there's a lack of negative thoughts due to an evolutionary problem that we have, and that is that germ theory only came about 150 years ago. So we have not evolved a response to COVID, an evolutionary response to COVID, which we ought to have. Now think about it. If you, if there's a bee in a room, you freak out. If there's a bee on a cricket pitch, you don't play cricket. Yet when it comes to COVID, we somehow don't have those fears, those innate fears. Think about it. If we were to say that if you got COVID, 1,000 snakes would fall on you in your bed, but they were harmless snakes, people would have a greater problem in getting COVID because there's that innate evolutionary fear of snakes. So I want you to comment on that, but I just wanted to make that observation because it's interesting that we actually lack very, very, very evolutionary important fears.
Absolutely. I think that our advances in technology has evolved faster than the biology has evolved. So we now have ideologies and a technology that has far surpassed the rate that nature grows at. And your question about business and now and COVID, the only suggestion I would have would be limit your news. As a sincere suggestion, set yourself a limit, whether it's an hour or whatnot, a day to get the information that you need, or an hour a week, whatever is suitable for you. The exposure, again, constant and consistent exposure to the anxiety, and especially South African news, it's very sensationalist. I've seen the reporter questions. They're exceptionally sensationalist. They lack neutrality, and the exposure to that we carry with us. It's in the subconscious always. And the more anxiety we expose ourselves to, the more we carry it with us through the day. There's already so much anxiety just from the exposure that we are unavoidably in contact with, from friends who say, I think I have to go for a test, or whatever the case may be, from colleagues who are, or peers who are struggling with their businesses or losing jobs. That anxiety from our microculture is already at a sufficient level for the system to produce enough cortisol and stress hormones and all of those kind of things that create that experience of anxiety in the system. If we're able to limit it from the macro culture to as much as we are able to, then there's one practical suggestion on how to deal with the anxiety in the moment.
I have a question, well, a statement and a question. Guru by name, teacher by nature. Thank you, Guru. Do you think that a crisis is a catalyst for oneness?
It can be, and unfortunately, as human beings, trauma usually is. It's interesting, just from a perception, the Guru by name from the comment from Adam is, again, it's perception. You hear the word guru, there's a specific reference that we have to that word, an association we have to the word in our society. Then you see the long hair and the beard, and then it starts to evoke these sensations inside when you engage with this specific person, and unaware of what the reality actually is. Could be a wrestling fan, PJ Black for life. The perception of consciousness and being able to bridge that gap, for me, that comes from exposure. It's the same way that the way that we deal with the world is written, the ineffective and effective ways that we deal with the world is written in the body. It is programmed. That's where the memory exists. The memory exists in the body. The filing system may exist in the brain, but the memory is in the body. You experience it physically. And I missed the second part of that question. I got thrown away. Do you think that crisis is a catalyst for oneness? Yes, trauma is often the catalyst for change. Obviously, it's a creative services agency that I'm involved in, and when we talk about creativity, we often find that it is when your back is against the wall. That is when you, for the first time, find no other choice but to survive other than doing something different, than going left or right. And that is when we would be able to be creative, when we'd be able to find new ways of being, new ways of dealing with problems and solutions and people, and ultimately new ways of seeing the world from an altered state of reality.
Guru, I've been practicing mindfulness for the last 4 years. And, just for those who don't know, mindfulness is about being mindful simply in relation to your breath. Okay. Now, it sounds as though, counterintuitive. How could your breath somehow give rise to this new level of consciousness, please just try it. And if you don't believe me, Yuval Harari, who has written the book Sapiens and Homo Deus, in his third book, Lessons from the 21st Century, read the last chapter on meditation, where he actually explains what it's about, and it couldn't be put better. But what I do, Guru, is the Sam Harris Waking Up app every single day. Because of that, I feel that I can take on double the work. I disassociate myself. It's had an immeasurable, profound effect. What practice do you recommend?
There are various processes and practices and techniques, Maurice, even within the realm of breathwork. Obviously, as the Academy, it's our job to stay ahead of everything, even from the research side and academia, as well as the practical application of it. There are various breathing techniques that one can use. And again, depending on what outcomes or what is needed, whether if it's just to still the mind, to raise energy in the body, whatever is required from that mindfulness space. There are apps, there are tools, there are numerous apps, and there are YouTube channels, and there are classes, and that all has to do with just mindfulness. And then there are various other techniques and processes where you can really dip somebody into a state of consciousness in quite a profound way, breathwork and other ways. So there are various tools and techniques. It always comes down to the issue of you have to do it. You've been doing it for 4 years every day. After day one, the impact and the influence is minimal. It is only after time that we start to see, oh goodness, lifting a dumbbell every day for the past 4 years, all of a sudden I have a strong arm.
That's exactly it. And you know what I find, Guru, I see we only got 2 minutes, but what I find is it's a microdose, let's call it. It's a cure to a lot. But to get people to take the microdose when they have a headache is virtually impossible when it comes to mindfulness and these practices. Yet, you're so right, after 4 years of practice, it takes time. The impact that it has on your life is immeasurable. It certainly is. So thanks, Guru. Thanks so much. Thanks to the attendees and the other panelists. Please remember to go to our website, www.cobra.org.za. You'll find this video on the website or on the various Facebook pages. So please watch it, please share it. This is really, really insightful. And believe it or not, if the audience were to take this to heart, it would probably be one of the most important webinars that I've given over the last 4 months. So thanks so much, Guru. This was really, really fantastic. And remember, conscious leadership is what it's all about. So thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.